صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله، صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة ويا عبرة كل مؤمن ومؤمنة، يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. إن حديث الباب ذو شجون مما جنت به يد الخؤون، أيهجم العدا على بيت الهدى، أيهجم العدا على بيت الهدى، ومحبط الوحي ومنتدى الندى، أتضرم النار بباب دارها، وآية النور على منارها، إن رضة تلك الأضلع الزكية رزية ما مثلها رزية، ومن نبوع الدم من ثدييها يعرف ما جرى عليها، وجاوزوا الحد بلطم الخد، شلت يد الطغيان والتعدي، الباب والجدار والدماء، شهود صدق ما به خفاء، لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وما محمد إلا رسول قد خلت من قبله الرسل، أفإن مات أو قتل انقلبتم على أعقابكم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على A second for the love of Imams Al-Hassan wal Hossein. A third for the love of Fatima al-Zahra with your loudest voices. One of the most controversial figures in Islamic history that has been discussed. Wars have been fought over this man. Blood has been shed over this man. Some have raised him to the point and given him favor over the Prophet himself. Some favor his teachings over the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, while there are others who claim he's a hypocrite or even a disbeliever. This controversial figure in Islamic history is Omar ibn al-Khattab. Tonight, God willing, in the next hour, we shall shed light on the life of this man, on his actions, on his qualities, on his achievements, and come up with some conclusions. Tonight, we'd like to discuss the truth about the life of Umar ibn al-Khattab. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Everything that we will discuss tonight will come from legitimate and accurate sources from our Sunni brothers and sisters. We will not mention anything from our own sources. Anything mentioned pertaining to his life, his biography, his actions, his manners, his behaviors, all comes from Sunni legitimate sources. As for his lineage, Umar is the son of Al-Khattab, the son of Nafil. His father is Al-Khattab, his grandfather is Nafil. His mother was a lady by the name of Hantama. Now, how did they get married? When did they get married? This is not very clear in many sources. Thus, there are some that pose questions and raise question marks. We will not go into that detail because his lineage does not matter to us. What matters is actions and behaviors. Historians mention that he was born year 6 after the year of the elephant, Am al-Fil. Rasulullah was born on the year of the elephant. That means he was 6 years younger than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was the father of Hafsa, the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That makes him the father-in-law of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As for his faith before Islam, this has been disputed. Most scholars believe and historians mention that he was a pagan, he was an idol worshipper throughout his life. And Ibn al-Athir, in his book Ustul Ghaba, Ibn al-Athir is a staunch defender of Umar ibn al-Khattab, a follower of Umar ibn al-Khattab. He himself says that Umar ibn al-Khattab كان شديدا على المسلمين قبل إسلامه, that he was strong against Muslims. He hated Islam and the Muslims before he converted. Thus, most scholars believe that he was a pagan, according to most historians. However, recently there was a study published by Al-Allama Al-Sheikh Muhammad Ali Birru, a scholar in Michigan. Now he lives in Michigan in the United States of America, in which he proves that Umar ibn al-Khattab was not a pagan and he was not an idol worshipper. Rather, he was Jewish. Umar was a Jew before converting into Islam. And for what reasons did he convert into Islam? It's not clear. However, he mentioned several points that support his argument that he was Jewish. For example, he had a friend by the name of Ka'b al-Ahbar. While Umar was in power, Ka'b al-Ahbar was a Jewish rabbi that converted to Islam. Umar gave him the platform, he gave him a minbar to come and give public lectures. This is just one point. There are several points that he mentions to prove his argument that Umar was Jewish. For example, he would ask Rasulullah to speak about Musa and to follow the footsteps of Musa. And one day Rasulullah scolded Umar. And he told him that if Musa today was alive, he would be following me. He would be following my footsteps. It's not the other way around. Anyhow, this is besides the point. But just to let you know that there's two opinions. Some say he was a pagan, he was an idol worshipper, and there are some that believe he was Jewish. As for the story of his conversion, Ibn Abi al-Hadid in his book Sharh Nahj al-Balagha mentions the following story. Umar ibn al-Khattab was told that his sister and his brother-in-law had converted to Islam and they are followers of Rasulullah Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala. He was extremely angered at this news. He rushes to the house of his sister. This is in Sharh Nahj al-Balagha by Ibn Abi al-Hadid al-Mu'tazili, a Sunni scholar. He rushes to his sister's house and he begins to physically beat her and abuse her along with her husband. When he leaves the house, a Muslim comes to him and he tells him, Ya Umar, did you know that Muhammad has been praying for you to convert into Islam? He said, no, I had never heard this. He said, yes, we have heard Rasulullah several times say, Allahumma a'azza al-Islam bi Umar. Oh Allah, honor Islam with Umar. Umar, hearing this dua from Rasulullah, attributed to Rasulullah, rushes to Dar al-Arqam, which was a house that Muslims would hide in from the evil of Quraysh. Rasulullah, his uncle Hamza, and others were staying at Dar al-Arqam. Ibn Abi al-Hadid says that some of the Sahaba were standing outside. When they saw Umar approach, they started hiding. I highly doubt that. They go in and they tell Rasulullah that Umar has approached. He said, yes, welcome him. Let him come inside. He comes inside. Rasulullah tells him, Ya Umar, would you like Allah to humiliate you the same way that He humiliated Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira? Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira was a kafir and Allah humiliated him. Would you like to have the same fate as Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira? And then again, poor Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it's as if he has no other dua than to say, Allahumma a'azza al-Islam bi Umar. Oh Allah, glorify and honor Islam with Umar. It was right there and then that Allah miraculously accepts the dua of Rasulullah and Umar pronounces the Shahadatain and he becomes Muslim. Ibn al-Athir in Usd al-Ghaba says that after his conversion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the following verse. Ya ayyuhan nabi, hasbuka Allah wa man ittaba'aka min al-mu'mineen. 39 people had converted to Islam. Umar was the 40th. Allah tells him, Ya Rasulullah, you have enough men now. Now go out and declare your Islam to Quraysh. First of all, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would never make such a dua. Was Islam lacking honor and glory for it to need Umar ibn al-Khattab to come and add to its glory and honor? Islam has enough glory and honor. Islam has honor from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and from the Quran. And if anyone were to bring honor to Islam, it would have been Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Thus you can tell the story from its basis has been fabricated. This is a story of his conversion. Ibn al-Athir in Ustul Ghaba mentions his qualities. He comes to the first quality, Umar's courage and bravery. He says, شهد عمر بن الخطاب مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله بدرا وأحدا والخندق وبيعة الرضوان وخيبر والفتح وحنينا وغيرها من المشاهد، وكان أشد الناس على الكفار، وشهد أحدا وثبت مع رسول الله. He says that Umar was with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi in every battle, in Badr, in Uhud, in Khaybar, in Hunayn, and he mentions all of these battles that Umar participated in, and he was very fierce against the kuffar. But this is quite funny, because when we try to look for a single name, for a single person killed at the hands of Umar ibn al-Khattab, we don't find a single name. Who did Umar kill? Who did he injure? Okay, he didn't kill anyone. He's not violent. He doesn't want to kill anyone. Did he injure someone? Did he cut someone's hand off? Feet off? There's not a single name. Not a single name. Not in our sources and not in any of the sources that discuss the biographies of the Sahaba. Not a single name. And as for the Battle of Khaybar, yes, Umar participated in the Battle of Khaybar. Umar was sent by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi with a group of companions to enter the battle, to kill Marhab and come back. Historians say that Umar went and he came back, يُجَبِّنُ أَصْحَابَهُ وَيُجَبِّنُوهُ. He calls them a coward and they're calling him a coward. If this is his participation in Khaybar, this is the only recording that we have of his participation in Khaybar. As for the other events, I think what the reality of what Ibn al-Athir is saying, I think he went to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, to all his participations, and what he did was he copied and pasted. All of the achievements of Amir al-Mu'mineen, he cut and he pasted for someone else. This is what happened. We don't see Umar ibn al-Khattab injuring any soldier or any comrade or any of these events. So why make up these lies? Why give a false impression of the man and give him a quality that he didn't own? If anyone deserves these qualities, it is Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. When all of the Sahaba ran away, this is the funny part. He says, in Uhud, وَثَبَتَ مَعَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ فِي Uhud. In Uhud, all of the Sahaba ran away except 5. Only 5 remained. Out of these 5, one of them was a female. And there was 4 men. One of them was a female. They all ran away. It was Amir al-Mu'mineen who stood by the side of Rasulullah. It was Amir al-Mu'mineen who fought until his sword broke. He comes to Rasulullah and he says, Ya Rasulullah, إِنَّ الْمَرْءَ لَيُقَاتِلْ بِسَيْفِهِ وَهَذَا سَيْفِي قَدْ انْكَسَرَ. Jibreel comes down with the sword of Dhul Faqar. He gives it to Rasulullah. Rasulullah gives it to Amir al-Mu'mineen. And then Jibreel shouts, لا فتى إلا علي ولا سيف إلا ذو الفقار. And then Jibreel tells Rasulullah, tells him, Ya Rasulullah, إن العلي الأعلى يقرأك السلام ويقول إن هذه هي المواساة. Look at Ali ibn Abi Talib. He's the only one that stuck to your side. Look at the others. Where are they? The others disappeared. In the battle of Khandaq, it was Ali ibn Abi Talib who stood to fight Amr ibn Abd Wudd al-Amiri. When he crosses the trench or the ditch, Rasulullah stands in front of his Sahaba, the top Sahaba, and he says, من لعمر وأنا أضمن له الجنة. Who fights Amr? And I testify, if Amr kills him, I am witness that he will enter paradise. Amir al-Mu'mineen stands. Rasulullah tells him, اجلس يا علي. Again, من لعمر وأنا أضمن له الجنة. Only Amir al-Mu'mineen stands. A third time, finally Amir al-Mu'mineen, Rasulullah tells Amir al-Mu'mineen to enter the battlefield. When Amir al-Mu'mineen entered, Rasulullah said a small statement, but this statement is worth millions. He says, خرج الإيمان كله إلى الشرك كله. All of faith has left to meet all of disbelief. And when Amir al-Mu'minin killed Amr ibn Abdul Wud, Rasulullah also gave him a medal, not a physical medal, but words that are worth millions of medals. He said, ضربة علي يوم الخندق أفضل من عبادة الثقلين. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Thus, why copy and paste the virtues of another man and give it to someone else? Why lie? There's no need to fabricate these virtues. When we study the life of Umar ibn al-Khattab, we see there was a well-known quality in him. And that was his objections to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Time and time again, Umar ibn al-Khattab was recorded to have objected to Rasulullah over several incidents. There are lots of incidents, but I choose for you today 2 incidents. The first incident was Sulh al-Hudaybiyah, when Rasulullah and the Muslims, they set a ceasefire, a peace treaty with the mushrikeen of Quraysh at a place called Al-Hudaybiyah. And that peace treaty was called Sulh al-Hudaybiyah. Quraysh did not allow the Muslims to enter Mecca for Umrah. They told them, come back next year. They had a ceasefire, a temporary ceasefire. Umar objected. He came and told Ya Rasulullah, why do we have a ceasefire? Why are we making compromises? Isn't the truth with us and falsehood is with them? Why are you accepting? Rasulullah tells him, Ya Umar, Allah has accepted this ceasefire. I have accepted, and you're objecting? Who are you to object? This is in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. He says, قال عمر لرسول الله ألسنا على حق وهم على باطل أليس قتلانا في الجنة وقتلاهم في النار. If we fight, aren't our dead in paradise and they're dead in hellfire? Rasulullah told him, يا ابن الخطاب إني رسول الله ولن يضيعني أبدا. Did you forget who I am? I'm the messenger of Allah. I receive direct orders from Allah. Allah tells me have a ceasefire, I have a ceasefire. Allah tells me fight, I fight. In As-Sirah al-Halabiyya, another very well-known Sunni source, he says, قال رسول الله لعمر يا عمر إني رضيت وتأبى. I accept the ceasefire, but you object to it? وأن عمر, after that he regretted objecting to Rasulullah. وأن عمر كان يقول بعد ذلك ما زلت أصوم وأتصدق وأصلي وأعتق مخافة كلامي الذي تكلمت فيه. He says, after that day, I keep on fasting and praying and giving charity just so that Allah forgives me for objecting to in the face of Rasulullah in the battle of Hudaybiyah. The second incident was when Abdullah ibn Ubay, a hypocrite in Medina, passed away. Abdullah ibn Ubay was a hypocrite. He passed away. He died in Medina. His son, the son of Abdullah, came and asked Rasulullah to come and pray over his father's body. His son was a Muslim. The father is a hypocrite. Out of sympathy with his son who was a Muslim, Rasulullah decided to come and pray over the body of Abdullah ibn Ubay, who was a hypocrite. Who objects? Umar. Umar tells him, Ya Rasulullah, you have no right to pray over his body. Because the Quran says, استغفر لهم أو لا تستغفر. استغفر لهم أو لا تستغفر لهم. إن تستغفر لهم 70 مرة لن يغفر الله لهم. The Quran, Umar is trying to teach Rasulullah about the Quran. He's trying to teach him this verse. He says, the Quran says, Allah tells you, seek forgiveness for them or don't seek forgiveness for them. Even if you seek forgiveness for them, who's them? Hypocrites. Even if you seek forgiveness for them 70 times, Allah will not forgive them. Rasulullah says, yes, I know. I've read the Quran. And I know this verse. But the Quran, Allah has given me a choice. He says, استغفر لهم أو لا تستغفر لهم. You can seek forgiveness or you don't. You don't want to seek forgiveness. At the end of the day, Allah won't forgive. Out of sympathy Rasulullah wanted to pray over the body of Abdullah ibn Ubay. But he had to object. He couldn't remain quiet. In other places, we see direct disobedience from this man towards Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Direct disobedience. Rasulullah gives him a direct order and he disobeys. And that was when Rasulullah ordered the Sahaba to join the army of Usama ibn Zayd. He orders the top Sahaba to join his army. And this is in all history books. This is not in Shia books. All history books. Sunni history books. Rasulullah ordered the top Sahaba, mainly Abu Bakr and Umar, to join the army of Usama ibn Zayd. Yet they didn't. They refused. Rasulullah comes out and he says, جهزوا جيش أسامة لعن الله من تخلف عن جيش أسامة. May Allah curse whoever doesn't join the army of Usama. Yet they didn't join the army of Usama. A direct disobedience to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Not only disobedience, but sometimes we see insults from this man, from this Sahabi, from this companion towards Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Ibn Abbas was narrated in Sahih Muslim, in Sahih al-Bukhari, in Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal, regarding the tragedy of Thursday. كان ابن عباس يقول الرزية كل الرزية ما حال بيننا وبين كتاب رسول الله. What happened on that Thursday before the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Rasulullah died on a Monday. 28th of Safar was on a Monday. The Thursday before that, the Sahaba were at the house of Rasulullah. Rasulullah was on his deathbed. They had all gathered around him. When Rasulullah saw that the top Sahaba are around him, he said, according to Ibn Abbas, لما حضر رسول الله, لما حضر يعني in the state of احتضار, ready to die. وفي البيت رجال فيهم عمر بن الخطاب قال النبي هلم أكتب لكم كتابا لن تضلوا بعدي أبدا. Come to me, let me write you a letter, you will never go misguided after me. فقال عمر إن النبي غلب عليه الوجع. Umar stated, Rasulullah has been overcome with pain. Rasulullah has overcome with pain, meaning ignore him. There's no need to write. Don't pay any attention to him. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Meaning there's no need to write. Khalas, the man is overcome with pain. You don't need to write him anything. أن النبي قد غلب عليه الوجع وعندكم القرآن. And you have the Quran. حسبنا كتاب الله. We don't need to write. We don't need to see what Rasulullah wants to write. We already have the Quran. فاختلفوا بينهم. When Rasulullah saw that an argument broke out, some of these Sahaba, they said, how dare Umar ibn al-Khattab say this in the face of Rasulullah? Others said exactly what Umar said, that there's no need for this letter by Rasulullah. When Rasulullah saw this, فقال النبي قوموا, get out. All of you, get out of my house. Now, the narration in Bukhari and Sahih Muslim says Umar said, قال عمر إن الرجل غلب عليه الوجع. That Rasulullah has overcome with pain. This is in Bukhari. However, when we come to other sources, Sunni sources and Shia sources, we see no, Umar used a different statement. Because that statement is too harsh, Bukhari saw he can't put this statement in there. What was that statement? إن الرجل ليهجر. The man is speaking nonsense. The man, not Nabi, Not Rasulullah. All of a sudden Rasulullah was downgraded into an ordinary man. إِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَيَهْجُرُ. The man is speaking nonsense. But of course, they can't say Umar said the man speaks nonsense. So they said the Prophet is overcome with pain in the face of Rasulullah. Rasulullah is still alive. In his face he says this. This, first of all, shows that his faith in the Quran is weak. Because the Quran itself says, وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. Rasulullah would not utter a statement, a single word from himself. It's all from Allah. That means that Umar poses a question on this verse. If he accepted this verse, he wouldn't say this statement. Number two, it shows that he had no respect for Rasulullah. Absolutely no respect. If you have a teacher, would you ever tell your teacher that he's speaking nonsense? Not a teacher. Someone from the elderly in your community. Leave the elderly. A stranger. A complete stranger. Would you ever tell him you're speaking nonsense? Let alone Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let alone the greatest human being that ever existed. Now what's ironic is that you will find some who have defended these actions by Umar. Some, when they looked at this hadith, when they looked at this incident, Raziyat Yawm al-Khamis, the tragedy of Thursday, they came and they tried to sugarcoat it. They tried to give justifications to Umar. Let's see some of these justifications. Some say, yeah, Rasulullah didn't want to write anything. He was just testing the Sahaba. He just wanted to test him to see, will they bring him something to write or not? And Umar was very witty, he was very smart. He discovered that this is only a test, so he said, Hasbuna kitab Allah, there's no need for this. Some give this justification. Others say, look at the audacity. Some say, Umar had pity for Rasulullah because he saw Rasulullah was tired and he was ill. He didn't want Rasulullah to get up and write. He wanted Rasulullah to lie down and rest. So he said, أَنَّ الرَّجُلَ غَلَبَ عَلَيْهِ الْوَجَعُ. Others come and say that Umar ibn al-Khattab was afraid Rasulullah will write something too difficult for the Muslims and Muslims cannot bear it and it will be too difficult for them. And if they abandon it, Allah will punish them. Out of pity for the Muslims, Umar said, أن النبي غلب عليه الوجع, there's no need. Since Umar pities the Muslims more than Rasulullah does. Others justified, they said Umar was afraid that the hypocrites will not take this letter seriously because it came out during the days of his illness. So just in case the hypocrites will say something, let's block the letter altogether. Some say, because Rasulullah stated, أَكْتُبْ لَكُمْ كِتَابًا لَن تَضَلُّوا بَعْدِي أَبَدًا, Umar knew that this was impossible. This ummah will never go astray. It will never be misguided. So he said, you know what? We don't need this letter. Foolish justifications. Idiotic justifications. These justifications are worse than the actual crime. They are worse than the actual incident that took place. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This was all during the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. But the role of Umar did not end there. The role of Umar continued. We see that Umar ibn al-Khattab played a major role in the event of Saqifa. And last year on this blessed minbar, I gave an entire lecture on the event of Saqifa. I think many of you were here. I will not repeat myself. But if you remember, Umar ibn al-Khattab played a crucial role in the event of Saqifa. When he came and he saw Al-Ansar had gathered, about to appoint Sa'd ibn Ibadah. They were about to give him allegiance. Umar ibn al-Khattab immediately arrives to the scene. And what does he shout? Ma mata Muhammad. Walan yamut. Rasulullah is not dead. And he will not die. And he will come back and he will punish whoever said that he died. I discussed this last year. No need to repeat. And for those of you that weren't here, the lecture is on YouTube. An analysis of the event of Saqifa. If it wasn't for Umar ibn al-Khattab, Saqifa would not have taken place. The Khilafah would not have reached Abu Bakr if it wasn't for Umar. Because he was the first to extend his hand and give his allegiance to Abu Bakr. When we read his biography, we see that some of his followers and defenders claim that Umar ibn al-Khattab was extremely knowledgeable, that he was a source of knowledge. For example, Ibn al-Athir in his book Usdul Khaba, he mentions a hadith by Ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. He says, listen to this hadith. He says, لو وضع علم عمر في كفة وعلم أهل الأرض في كفة لرجح علم عمر. If the knowledge of Umar was put on a scale on one side, and the knowledge of the entire humanity on the other scale, the knowledge of Umar would be heavier. And it's been ascribed to Ibn al-Musayyab that he had stated, ما أعلم أحدا بعد رسول الله أعلم من عمر ibn al-Khattab. That I don't know anyone after Rasulullah more knowledgeable than Umar ibn al-Khattab. This is what they claim. This is what they claim. That Umar ibn al-Khattab was the most knowledgeable person after Rasulullah. And in another place, it was recorded, لما مات عمر ذهب 9 أعشار العلم. That when Umar died, 9/10 of world's knowledge disappeared with the death of Umar. Okay. Now, we're in front of this huge giant, in front of this huge scholar, who in their books, they mention when he was asked if there is a mujnib, and a person in the state of janaba, who does not have water, what should he do? How should he pray? Umar answered, he doesn't need to pray at all. While the Quran says, أو جاء أحدكم من الغائط أو لامستم النساء فلم تجدوا ماء فتيمموا. The Quran says that if you are in a state of janaba and you don't have water, then perform tayammum. This is 9/10 of knowledge right here. This is 9/10. In another case, they brought a married lady, pregnant, 6 months. Her husband, she delivered, she gave birth at 6 months. Yani after her marriage, after 6 months from her marriage, she delivered. They came to Umar ibn al-Khattab and they said that you need to punish her. She's accused of adultery because it's only 6 months. How is it possible for a woman to give birth in her 6th month? In 6 months. Umar was ready to punish her. Luckily, Amir al-Mu'mineen passed and he came and he said, no, ya Umar, no. Why are you punishing her? He said, because she gave birth at 6 months. He said, yes, haven't you read the Quran? The Quran in one verse says that a child, the days in which his mother's pregnant with him, and his nursery in which he's breastfed is 60 months. وَحَمْلُهُ وَفِصَالُهُ 30 شهرا, 30 months. And another verse that that nursery is 24 months. وَالْوَالِدَاتُ يَرْضَعْنَ أَوْلَادَهُنَّ حَوْلَيْنِ كَامِلَيْنِ. So if a mother could be pregnant and breastfeeds for 30 months, and she breastfeeds, and the most amount of breastfeeding is 24 months. So what's the least amount of pregnancy? 30. Subtract 24 from 30. 6 months. 6 months. Here, Umar ibn al-Khattab stops and he says his famous quote, لولا علي لهلك عمر لا أبقاني الله لمعضلة ليس لها أبا الحسن. This incident, some scholars have narrated it. Umar ibn al-Khattab said this statement, لولا علي لهلك عمر, not once, not twice, over 90 times he uttered this statement. In another case, Umar ibn al-Khattab one day stands in the masjid, he comes on the minbar, and he starts yelling at the people. that why is the dowry of your woman so high? Why is the dowry so high nowadays? Reduce your dowry. Reduce the dowry of your wives. And then he says, if I catch one of you, one of the women, who has a dowry more than 400 dirhams, I will take it away from her. I will take it away from her. If it's more than 400 dirhams. One lady, a female, not one of the men, one of the ladies, she gets up and she says, Ya Amir al-Mu'minin, but the Quran says, وَلَوْ آتَيْتُمْ إِحْدَاهُنَّ قِنْطَارًا فَلَا تَأْخُذُوهُ. If you give a whole chest full of treasure as dowry to your wife, don't take it from her. The Quran says a treasure box, and you say 400 dirhams? Umar was embarrassed. He said, كُلُّ النَّاسِ أَفْقَهُ مِنْكَ يَا عُمَرَ. Everyone is more knowledgeable than Umar. Everyone. And another quote, he was stated saying, امرأة ناضلت إمامها فنضلته. A woman fought her imam and she defeated him. This is in their books. So where is this knowledge? Who was the most knowledgeable after the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? As for his legislations, we can give lectures and speeches about his legislations and the laws that he made. The laws that he made from his own. In my previous lectures and other lectures, I've talked about this. I won't go into detail. But some of the laws that he made from his own. He removed Hayya ala khair al-amal from the adhan, which is an essential factor. It's an essential part from the adhan. He took it out. And he put a part in which is not part of the adhan. As-salatu khayrun min an-nawm. He disfigured the adhan. When we come to Hajj, we see that he meddled with Hajj. There was mut'at al-Hajj, he removed it. When it comes to marriage, mut'at al-Nisa, he removed it. When it comes to Salah, he instituted Salat al-Tarawih. He instituted Salat al-Tarawih. And when he came to the masjid in the month of Ramadan, and I've mentioned this in my previous lectures, that's why I will not repeat, I'll just repeat this part. He came into the masjid one night in Ramadan, he saw people standing, praying, bowing, not praying together. He said, why aren't they praying together? Let them pray jama'ah. Let there be one imam and they pray jama'ah. After a couple of nights, he saw one imam and everyone praying together. He liked the view. He said, نِعْمَةُ الْبِدْعَةِ هَذَا. This is a beautiful innovation. This is a good innovation. He himself admits that it's an innovation. That it wasn't during the life of Rasulullah. He brought it himself. In some parts, he had the audacity to say, قَالَ اللَّهُ وَأَنَا أَقُولُ. Allah says this, but I say this. Allah says this, but I say this. When we read the biographies regarding his life, we see that they fabricated lots of riches regarding him. And remember, this is what we talked about last night, remember? For those of you that were with us, that there have been so many fabrications in Islamic history, that there were some narrators that sold their faith. They did it for business. As long as there's money, and as long as there are people to pay them, they will fabricate all sorts of ahadith, all sorts of narrations. Fabrications were abundant. We see that Umar ibn al-Khattab received a good sum of these fabrications. We see there's ahadith that praise him. For example, and these ahadith are ascribed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They say, قال Rasulullah, in praise of Umar. And if you remember what we said, what Rasulullah had stated, that he who lies and ascribes lies to Rasulullah, let him prepare his seat in hell. من تعمد علي كذبا فليتبوأ مقعده من النار. Yet we see fabrications about the life of Umar. For example, they say, قال رسول الله إن الله جعل الحق على لسان عمر. Allah has put the truth on the tongue of Umar. على لسان عمر وقلبه وهو الفاروق. They ascribe another hadith to Rasulullah, Ya Ali, Hadhan, and Rasulullah points to Umar and Abu Bakr, Hadhani Sayyida Kuhul Ahl al-Jannah. So when Rasulullah stated regarding Imam al-Hasan, Imam Hussein, Hadhani Sayyida Shababi Ahl al-Jannah, this makes sense. They are the masters of the youth of paradise. But they couldn't sit still, so they had to fabricate a hadith regarding the two men. They are the masters of the elderly of heaven. They are the masters of the elderly of heaven. Even though we have a hadith that in heaven everyone's young, there's no elderly. Everyone is young. Whoever enters heaven, they'll be young. So where is this Sayyida Kuhul Ahl al-Jannah? They ascribe to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi that he had stated, مَا طَلُعَتِ الشَّمْسِ عَلَى رَجُلٍ خَيْرٌ مِّنْ عُمَرٍ. That the sun has not rose on a man greater than Umar ibn al-Khattab. I'm not even going to comment. I'm going to leave the comments to you. In another hadith ascribed to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, لَوْ كَانَ بَعْدِي نَبِيٌّ لَكَانَ عُمَرَ ibn al-Khattab. Allahu Akbar. That if there was a prophet after me, it would have been Umar ibn al-Khattab. I don't know which sort of prophet this would be. A prophet that spent 36 years of his life worshipping an idol. A pagan, worshipping idols. All of a sudden this idol worshipper claims himself to be a prophet. I don't know what sort of prophecy this would be. Oh, and this last hadith, you're going to enjoy this one. Ascribed to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. قال رسول الله إن الشيطان ليخاف منك يا عمر. Shaitan is scared of you, Ya Umar. As for his conquests, Ibn al-Athir mentions in the biography of Umar in Ustul Ghaba. He says, وَأَمَّا سِيرَتُهُ فَإِنَّهُ فَتَحَ الْفُتُوحِ وَمَصَّرَ الْأَمصَارِ وَفَتَحَ الْعِرَاقَ وَالشَّامَ وَمِصْرَ وَالْجَزِيرَ وَدِيَارَ بَكْرَ وَأَذَرْبَيْجَان وَبِلَاد فارس وَخُوزِسْتان. He mentions his conquest, that during the days of Umar, there were so many conquests, Iraq, Iran, and all the names that I mentioned. And this is a great service to Islam, because if it wasn't for Umar ibn al-Khattab, Islam would not have expanded. The Muslim nation would not have expanded. All these expansions came at the hands of Umar ibn al-Khattab. Isn't this a great service to Islam? And there are some naive followers of Ahlul Bayt that say these words as well. We say that we should glorify this Sahabi because if it wasn't for him, Islam would not have expanded. Let me tell you something. Let me ask you a question and then we'll get to this. Let me go rob a bank. Let me steal 10 million pounds and let me come build a masjid with it. What do you think? Is this a nice masjid? Will you come pray in that masjid? It's a nice masjid with a qubba and minara and all the calligraphy, and I'll make it very nice. I'll make it the nicest masjid in London. What do you think? But I'll have to go and steal it from the bank. What's the point of these conquests? Even if you expand the Islamic empire to the entire globe, but if the basis is wrong, what good is this? What good is this? You take the Khilafah from someone. The Khilafah belongs to someone. You take it from him and then you make these expansions. This is not a quality. This is not a virtue. This is not a virtue because the basis is wrong. What good is these expansions when you don't have the right leader? When you don't have the right Khilafah? When you don't have the right vision? What good is it? As for his friendship with Ka'b al-Ahbar, this is a very well-known friendship. Umar ibn al-Khattab, as we mentioned earlier, Umar ibn al-Khattab, during his days in power, had a friend by the name of Ka'b al-Ahbar. Ka'b al-Ahbar was a Jewish rabbi. He was a Jewish rabbi who supposedly converted to Islam. And I say supposedly. He converted to Islam. All of a sudden, he became best buddies with Umar ibn al-Khattab. He would come inside the masjid, and this is in their sources. He would come to the masjid, sit on the minbar, and begin giving lectures. He would give lectures and sermons based on the Torah, He would tell them, this will happen, that will happen. He would give lectures based on the Torah. And what's ironic is that while this Jewish rabbi was given the right to speak, and there were people who would write down his lectures and ahadith, the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi were all gathered and burnt by the same man, Umar ibn al-Khattab, after the death of Rasulullah. He asked all the Sahaba, who has written the ahadith of Rasulullah? They thought that perhaps he wants to publish them, perhaps he wants to spread them. When they brought him the ahadith of Rasulullah, piles of books, he gathered them and he burnt all of them. Why? What's the excuse? The excuse is because perhaps people will confuse the Quran with the ahadith of Rasulullah. And we don't want anyone to confuse. We want people to recite the Quran and not the ahadith. So let's burn the ahadith. This was the excuse. While we know what the real reason was. We know the real reason was. The reason was that these ahadith were full of virtues of Ahlul Bayt. These ahadith led to the Khilafah of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, and he didn't want anyone to come across these ahadith. Finally, the biographers mention the assassination of Umar ibn al-Khattab. They mention that one day he asks from a goldsmith by the name of Abu Lu'lu', who was originally from Persia, from Iran. He was a goldsmith that would produce swords and daggers. He told him, I want you to make me a dagger. Umar ibn al-Khattab asks Abu Lu'lu' to make him a dagger. Abu Lu'lu' said, yes, I will make you a dagger in which people will be talking about it for years. When he left, they say, the historians say that Umar ibn al-Khattab smiled and he said, he just threatened me. The man just made a threat, he just threatened me. And indeed, after 3 days, he promised him that he will bring him the dagger within a couple of days. After 3 days, while Umar ibn al-Khattab was praying Jama'ah in the middle of Salah, Abu Lu'lu' stands and he stabs him in the back, or he stabs him in the side. I apologize. He stabs him in the side. And if you remember what we mentioned last year, and historians mention this, Ibn al-Athir mentions this in his book, that when Umar was stabbed in the middle of Salah, he shouted, Akh, laqad qatalani al-kalb. Ouch, the dog just killed me. And he fell. When they brought him back home, when they brought doctors, they saw that Umar ibn al-Khattab is khalas. He doesn't have too much longer to remain. Ibn al-Athir says that his companions, they asked him, would you like anything? Would you like to eat anything, to drink anything? He said, yes. I would like some nabidh. I would like some wine. And they brought him wine. This is in Usd al-Ghaba. The author of this book is a staunch defender of Umar ibn al-Khattab. I'm not mentioning to you Bihar al-Anwar or Al-Kafi or any of these books. This is in Usd al-Ghaba. They say that they brought him nabidh, which is wine. He drank it and it started coming out from his side, from his injury. They realized that these are his last moments. He sends a message to Aisha that I would like to be buried in your room, in your house. And it's as if it's her house. The house of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alih, which is the inheritance to Fatima al-Zahra and her children, and the inheritance to 9 other wives. And Aisha was just one of the 9. Yet the whole house was hers. That's why the poet says, لَكِلْ تِسْعُ مِنَ الثُّمْنِ. You have 1/8 of 1/9. Because a wife receives 1/8 of her husband's inheritance. And there's 9 wives. That means each wife receives 1/9 of 1/8. Or 1/8 of 1/9. That means 1/72. Anyhow, Umar sends his son Abdullah to go to Aisha and seek permission to be buried in her house next to Rasulullah. Aisha says, Ahlan wa sahlan. Let him come and be buried next to Rasulullah. But she tells him, tell your father, don't leave without setting a Khalifa. Appoint someone. Don't leave this nation without a Khalifa. You have to appoint someone. When it comes to Umar, Aisha knows that he has to appoint a Khalifa. But when it comes to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, they say Rasulullah left without setting a Khalifa. That means Aisha is smarter than Rasulullah. According to this, that means Aisha is smarter than Rasulullah. Because Aisha tells Umar, set a Khalifa. Ya Rasulullah didn't even think about setting a Khalifa. Anyhow, Umar ibn al-Khattab decides on setting a council. He doesn't appoint one person, he sets a shura. A council of 6 men. Who are these men? Ali ibn Abi Talib, Uthman ibn Affan, Abd al-Rahman ibn Auf, Talha, Az-Zubayr, and Umar, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, afwan. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. These 6 men. And he said, and he states that I know when Rasulullah passed away, these 6 men Rasulullah was satisfied with. Thus, whoever the Muslims choose from within these 6, I will also be satisfied with. And then he sets guidelines. Now listen to these guidelines that Umar ibn al-Khattab set. He said, I give you 3 days. I give you 3 days. You gather, kind of like the conclave. You gather for 3 days and you choose one from amongst you. During these 3 days, the Muslims will live their normal life. Within 3 days, you have to choose someone. If none of you, if you don't choose any of you, I will ask for all 6 of you to be killed. Now, he was just saying that Rasulullah died and he was pleased with these 6 men. Now he's saying, let them all die. I don't know how could this go together. Sahaba who Rasulullah is pleased with, but he's willing to cut their heads off. And then he said, if 5 of you agree on one, and one of you disagrees, cut his head off. And go with the one that the 5 chose. If 4 agree and 2 disagree, cut their head off. And go with the one that the 4 chose. If you split in half, 3 of you choose one and 3 choose the other, go with the group that Abd al-Rahman ibn Auf is in. Go in that group. Of course, Umar ibn al-Khattab, he said it in a way to make sure that the power doesn't come to whom? Doesn't come to whom? To Ali ibn Abi Talib. He was hoping that Amir al-Mu'mineen will be the only one to disagree. His head will go. Or if it's 2, it will probably be Ali and Zubayr. Their heads will go. If it's 3, most likely Abd al-Rahman ibn Auf will not be in the group that Ali ibn Abi Talib is in. Anyhow, Umar passes away. He dies. The group gathers. Immediately, Az-Zubayr leaves the contest. He says, I don't want to be the Khalifa. And I give my vote to Ali ibn Abi Talib. Abd al-Rahman ibn Auf says, I leave the contest as well. I give my vote to Uthman. Talha and Sa'd ibn Abi... Talha gives his vote to Uthman as well. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas gives his vote to Ali ibn Abi Talib. So who remains in the contest? Amir al-Mu'mineen and Uthman. These are the only 2 that remain. Abd al-Rahman ibn Auf comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam and he says, extend your hand. I will give you allegiance. Like we mentioned yesterday. I will give you allegiance ala sunnatillahi wa sunnati rasulihi wa ala sunnatil shaykhain. Do you accept? Amir al-Mu'mineen said, ala sunnatillah, I accept. Ala sunnati rasulillah, I accept. But ala sunnati shaykhain, no. Who are the shaykhain? Who are the shaykhain compared to me? I won't accept. Abd al-Rahman ibn Auf turns to Uthman and he says, Ubayi'uka ala sunnatillahi wa sunnati rasulihi wa ala sunnati shaykhain. Uthman immediately accepts. They shake their hands and Uthman becomes the Khalifa. All set by Umar ibn al-Khattab to make sure that the Khilafah doesn't come to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And of course, There was one more incident. There were a lot of, and this was a short summary, and I hope my aim was to be as objective and unemotional, unbiased as possible. And these facts are mentioned in Sunni sources, my dear friends. There are a lot of other incidents. As you see, a life full of achievements, a life full of actions. Yes, the Sahabi had one more achievement that we didn't mention. A very huge achievement. This achievement was to carry wood and fire and head towards the house of Fatima al-Zahra. This was one of his actions. Sent by Abu Bakr, Omar ibn al-Khattab heads towards the house of Fatima al-Zahra, along with several other of the Sahaba carrying wood and fire towards the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Fatima. Fatima al-Zahra sees him. She asks, Ibn al-Khattab, what you have come to do, what? He said, by God, I have come to burn down this house unless you leave the house and give allegiance. They told him, do you know who's in this house? Fatima al-Zahra is in this house. He said, yes, so what? So what? Even if Fatima is in this house, Ali is in this house, Al-Hassan and Hossein is in this house, I will burn down this house. This man was the first to terrorize the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This was the first act of terrorism to take place in Islamic history. This incident set a precedent in Islamic history, a direct act of terrorism. So don't be shocked, my dear brothers and sisters, if you see terrorist acts taking place in Iraq or Syria or other places, or in Pakistan where our brothers and sisters are being killed. They're just the progeny. They're just the children, and they're just the followers. They all learn from that first terrorist act that took place at the house of Fatima al-Zahra salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayha. Now let's come to the house of Fatima tonight. Fatima al-Zahra has departed. Tonight the house of Fatima is lonely. Fatima has departed them. Al-Hassan wal-Hussein and Zainab and Kulthum tonight are orphans. They're sitting alone tonight. Their mother is not amongst them. Their mother is being ready to being washed tonight by Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. When the Sahaba, they gathered at the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen wanting to participate in the burial of Fatima al-Zahra, Amir al-Mu'mineen asks Imam al-Hassan, he tells him, go outside and tell them that the burial will be delayed. So people go back home. Amir al-Mu'mineen waited till the middle of the night when all eyes were shut. He wakes up in the middle of the night and he takes Fatima al-Zahra to Al-Mukhtasal to wash her body tonight, along with the help of Asma bint Umays. Amir al-Mu'mineen puts the body of Fatima al-Zahra on the Mukhtasal, and the children are watching. They're watching their father wash their mother, and Asma is assisting him. Amir al-Mu'mineen is pouring the water over her body, even though she asked, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, don't uncover me, keep a cloth over my body. But Amir al-Mu'mineen didn't know why she didn't want to be exposed or uncovered. But moments soon he will discover why she didn't want to be revealed. Amir al-Mu'mineen was washing her body. He was pouring the body, putting his hands over her body to make sure the water flows. All of a sudden he came across her ribs. He noticed that she has broken ribs in her chest. Amir al-Mu'mineen took a step back and he said, Ya Asma, what is this on her chest? I feel a broken rib. Why didn't she tell me about this broken rib? Asma tells him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, she was embarrassed of you. She was shy to tell you. Amir al-Mu'mineen realizes that Fatima al-Zahra had lived for these 2 months with this pain in her rib, this pain in her chest. She had broken ribs without saying a word to her husband, Amir al-Mu'mineen. Amir al-Mu'mineen washes her. He shrouds her, he puts on the kafan. He's about to take her out of the house. They're about to carry her to the cemetery to bury her. And then he calls the children, Ya Hassan, wa ya Hossein, wa ya Zainab, wa ya Kulthum, halummu wa tazawwadu min ummikuma Fatima, min ummikum Fatima. Come, my dear children, come and say your last farewell to your mother Fatima. You'll no longer be seeing her again. Come say your farewell to her. Come say goodbye to her. Amir al-Mu'mineen says they came, they threw themselves on the body of their mother Fatima, Al-Hassan, Wal-Hussein, wa Zainab. They threw themselves, they started shouting and crying. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Ashhadu billah annaha hannat wa annat wa akhrajat yadayha wa dhammathuma ila sadriha. I swear by God that she started crying, she started wailing, and then she took her hands, and she grabbed them and she embraced them. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, all of a sudden I heard a sound saying, Ya Ali, irfa'uhuma, فإنهما قد أبكيا ملائكة السماء. They take the body out towards the cemetery, towards that grave. Only if we knew where was that grave. Is it next to Rasulullah? Is it in Baqi'? Is it inside her house? We don't know. Yet they carried that body towards the cemetery, towards the grave. Only a handful of men, Amir al-Mu'mineen and his 2 sons, Salman, Abu Dhar, Al-Miqdad, only a handful. They carry Fatima al-Zahra to her last house, to her last home, to her grave. Amir al-Mu'mineen goes inside that grave before Fatima al-Zahra. He prepares the grave for her, and then he grabs the body. He inserts the body. He puts the face of Fatima al-Zahra on the soil. He puts her body on the soil. He leaves the grave. He pours the sand on the grave. He removes the sand from his hand, and then he looks to the grave of Rasulullah. Then this is the first time that Amir al-Mu'mineen begins to complain to Rasulullah. As-salamu alayka ya Rasulallah, عني وعن ابنتك النازلة في جوارك. Peace be upon you, Ya Rasulullah, on my behalf and on the behalf of your daughter. قل يا رسول الله عن صفيتك الصبر وضعفي عن سيدة النساء تجلدي. Ya Rasulullah, I have lost patience. I have no patience to live after your daughter. Ya Rasulullah, يا رسول الله قد استرجعت الوديعة وأخذت الرهينة واختلست الزهراء. Ya Rasulullah, you trusted me with your daughter the night of the wedding. You gave me your daughter. Tonight, Ya Rasulullah, she's coming back to you. However, Ya Rasulullah, I'm very embarrassed. When she came to my house, she was safe, she was sound. But tonight she's coming to you, Ya Rasulullah, with broken ribs. Ya Rasulullah, amma huzni fasarmad, wa amma layli famus'ad. I can no longer sleep at night, Ya Rasulullah. ولا يبرح الحزن أو يختار الله لي دارك التي أنت فيها مقيم. وستنبئك ابنتك بتضافر أمتك علي. And your daughter tonight, she's a guest among you. She will tell you what your nation did to us. وعلى هضمها حقها فاستخبرها الحال. Ask her, يا رسول الله, tell her, what did this nation do to her? فكم من غليل معتلج في صدرها لم تجد إلى بثه سبيلا. لكل اجتماع. These were the verses of poetry recited by Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam himself after he removed the dust from his hands, after he buried Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. The hadith says, Haja bihi al-huzn. All of a sudden he remembered that Fatima al-Zahra is no longer with him. She's under the sound now, under the sand. لكل اجتماع من خليلين فرقة وكل الذي دون الفراق قليل. وإن افتقادي فاطما بعد أحمد دليل على أن لا يدوم خليل. تعاليها الشجعان وزاد همي وهيج الغمي. Raise your voices to that lonely grave in Medina tonight. Let your voices reach that grave. Let Fatima al-Zahra record your names in her majlis tonight. تعاليها الشجعان وزاد همي وهيج الغمي. وارخص غالي دموعي واجرى من الجفن دمي. يوم الصاحة الزهرة خلوا عن ابن عمي. صاح الرجس يا قنفذ بالصوت رد ليها وروعها ولوعها وهي تنادي. لفرع واشتكي لله بكل اللي علي سادي. يا خلوا علي الكرار لا تيتمون ولادي. تصرخ والعصا ولا تتلوى على يديها. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله.